Good
Can you hear
afternoon,
me?
everyone.
Over there?
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get ready to get started. I did just want to let you know we do have a poll that is open, and I am going to share my screen to show you how you can view it.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid over there.
Yeah, Ken seems to answer the third question on the poll.
Yeah.
Give you an option.
Everyone should be able to see my screen now. I just wanted to start off with a few little housekeeping items. The first thing is that at the bottom of your screen, you will see this box that I've circled in red. This is where you can make sure that your mics are muted. Please make sure your mics are muted. We do have almost 220 people registered for this webinar today. And so we do have the chat box feature though.
Yep, all right, cool, thank you.
At the bottom right corner, there's another box that I've highlighted, that's participants. You can click there for the chat box. You can also click those three little buttons to the far right corner, and that would also give you the option to see the polling. When you click that, you can separate your boxes so everything's in a different window. Please make sure, though, that you keep your video in the strip mode. That just keeps everything better organized for you. But again, if you just click the three buttons down to the bottom right corner, you should be able to have the option for polling where you can do your polling. We are recording the webinar today. We will have this posted on our external website. It generally takes us about a week to get everything processed so that way we can get it posted. And with that, I am going to pass it over for Russ if you want to do some quick introductions.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't want to take it too much time, but this is Russ Dudley, the Division Administrative Director for the Local Assistance Division. We've got a really good two-part webinar for you today and tomorrow morning. And I don't want to hold up the information, so I'll make this quick, but I do want to thank everybody for attending our webinar today. We are doing the best we can to continue to provide training to and gather feedback from our localities. And part of that feedback are the participants, and the poll is still open for another 45 seconds. So if you haven't had a chance to answer our poll, to fill out our poll, please do right now. But we can't do this without all of you joining us and without the assistance we get from our presenters. Today, our presenters are going to include folks from our construction division at VDOT and folks from Federal Highway Administration. I think they're going to introduce themselves as they come in. And Michaela, do you think you can mute everyone other than myself while I speak?
That is what I'm getting ready to do. Hold on.
Great. And so today we're going to focus on federal requirements for contracting and get both FHWA's perspective and VDOT's perspective. We're going to do something a little interesting. We're going to do something we don't do very often, and that's the contractor's perspective. So I think that was that's going to be pretty interesting tomorrow. So Michaela's going to go over how to ask questions, how to interact with us, but please ask questions and provide feedback as you feel appropriate. I think she'll instruct you on how to do that, that we're not all stepping on each other. And don't be shy, please. It's always best when everyone participates and everyone benefits the most when everyone provides some feedback and in your own perspective. So, again, thanks to everyone for joining us. And I think I'll turn it back over to you, Michaela. Is that right?
Yes. So I'm going to hit a mute all real quick, and then I'm going to unmute myself. Okay. All right, so as Russ said, as I went over at the beginning, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, there is a little bubble. It says chat. If you click that, you'll be able to see the chat box. If you're unable to hear, please, a few people, they said that they're having issues hearing, so I'm going to start reaching out to them. But if you still have issues hearing, there is a dial number that was in the email that was sent with the joining information. You can call in. Okay. I'm getting ready to share the presentation and we will get started. Harold and Karen, we do have, are you able to see the polling results? It is up. If not, I can run through it for you. You can't see it? Okay. All right, so for the first question, it was what organization are you representing today? 63 is locality. We have about 10 from VDOT Central Office, 16 are VDOT District Local Liaisons. We have about 10 District Local Liaisons. Then from FHWA, we have 3, and then we have 17 people who had chose other. The next question was on average, how many federal projects do you administer a year? So we have 30 that said the small amount, 35 said a medium amount, which is 6 to 19 projects. We had 21 that said a large amount, which is 20 plus, and then 18 said not applicable. For the third question, it looks like we got no answers. It was supposed to be a short answer text box. So if you, for some reason, were not able to type in the text box, if you have any questions for us, so please go ahead and just put them in the chat box.
Hey, Michaela, can you, I was unable to hear. I got the 30%, the 30%, the 35%. What was the 20 plus projects?
We had 21.
21. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the third question, it was what do you hope to learn from the webinar today? And what questions do you have on federal aid contracts? So if you have any questions or anything that you're hoping to learn, please just use the chat box feature to put those questions in, and our presenters as well as myself will be able to see those. So we'll make sure that we hit all those. Okay. I am gonna go over to our presentation.
She wants to do her, she can do it online. I mean, you know what? You know what I can do?
All right, and we have the presentation up. Harold, Karen, are you able to see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you, Michaela, and thank you, the Local Assistance Division, for coordinating this, and to VDOT, Harold, for kind of coming up with this. It was a great collaboration between Federal Highway and VDOT. So I guess, Harold, you want to do a quick introduction? I guess I can introduce myself. So Karen King, so I'm with the Federal Highway Division in Virginia. I have the safety programs, and I also oversee the local public agencies program. I'm currently finishing up a rotation overseeing the field operations team with the area engineers. Harold, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, my name is Harold Caples. I am the state contract engineer here in the construction division with the Virginia Department of Transportation. I am responsible for all the advertisements and awards and executions of all of our design bid build procurement, as well as estimating. Part of that responsibility is the all the federal aid projects that are locally administered have to come through my shop for award or advertisement authorization and award authorization. So as the just to put a name with a face, my staff are the ones that your local project coordinators are working with, and from the districts to get that authorization to be able to move forward with award and add on a project. So I had reached out to FHWA late last year, and we're priming this for the local assistance workshop that we would have had back this fall. Unfortunately, that didn't take place. Karen's being modest. She's done most of all of the work here, and I applaud her efforts and look forward to hearing her share some of the insights. Some of these things some of the folks will have heard from me and my staff before, but I'm hoping to get new perspective and some new information out there for all the localities to kind of digest and to help with the understanding of these locally administered projects. That, Aaron.
Thank you. You want to go to the next slide? So the topics that we're going to go over, I'm going to provide sort of an overview of how Federal Highway does our risk-based stewardship oversight of our program, and touch on our stewardship and oversight delegation, how it relates to locally administered projects. Just a really good, if you're kind of new to this program, really good refresher of what everything's sort of based on and how it works, and then we'll get into some do's and don'ts of federal aid contracts. All right, next slide. So the next slide is going to show you just an organization of our division office. We're just under 30 employees, kind of organized from cradle to grave on projects from planning and environment and right-of-way, innovation, civil rights, and then our technical areas with structures and bridge, safety, operations, ITS, and then our field ops team. So some of you probably interface mostly, probably with like planning environment too, but also with our area engineer team. And then that, we're our area engineers have several different districts or, major projects. And the website down there too, if you have a hard time remembering what our email address is or phone numbers, it's all right there on our website. So pretty easy to get, or you can just Google Federal Highway Virginia. Next slide. All right, so risk-based stewardship and oversight. So we use this approach, VDOT kind of uses a similar approach and we use it to be consistent with our statutes, regulations, executive orders. So how we're involved in programs. Our involvement has evolved over time from sort of the interstate era to the present. Our program has gotten a lot more complex in many different areas in funding and contracting methods, and the state does assume a greater amount of responsibility. We use our program involvement to improve, identify risks and response strategies that informs our program involvement. And when we get involved in projects, it doesn't just mean that we're going to approve everything, especially with a locally administered project. We are always working through the district offices who works directly with the locality. But we determine our involvement based on, if there's elevated risks, either programmatically or project specific. It's kind of all based on our stewardship and oversight agreement. So the next slide kind of shows, gives a little bit of a visual of three basic aspects of stewardship and oversight. So right there in the center is our stewardship and oversight agreement. And so it kind of documents the extent to which the state assumes responsibility for Federal Highway to carry out, what was traditionally handled by Federal Highway. There are a set of required project and program actions that Federal Highway retains, financial actions, authorization of projects, NEPA, some aspects of right-of-way. So there's just some things that cannot be assumed by the states. And then our risk-based project and program involvement can be done in a variety of ways. Some of you might have been involved in if we've done a program or project review. So on, I guess, my right side, I guess it's everybody's right side, right? Just an example of what our program review documents look like. We've done them in various areas of contracting or, the ADA, accessibility. And but there also might be situations in a state where there's project level decisions that Federal Highway decides to retain, or we would decide to do that on your risk assessment and for a project. And then the last on the left side, I probably should have had a poll on who's all been involved in the CAP program. That would have been a good one. So we've been doing the compliance assessment program, I think, since 2015 or maybe somewhere around there. And but it has actually given us a pretty solid, pretty straightforward way to see nationally and at the state and local level sort of where we're at. It gives us a test of certain regulations and something that is statistically based through sample sizes and everything. That gives us a good idea of what's going on. And we also do compliance through our financial integrity reviews, billing reviews and things like that. So you can go to the next slide.
Karen?
Yeah.
And I want to add something here just from the stewardship and
Sure.
oversight perspective, just to let everyone on the call know, we moved to this it was 2014-15 timeframe that we went from the old kind of method to this risk-based approach. And of note, the department has essentially taken on almost all responsibilities that we can beyond. So to be in complete, kind of controlling our own destiny, if you will. But I just wanted to convey that to the group so they kind of had an understanding of what, so everything that y'all were doing, we're now responsible for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a double-edged sword, right? So getting into how this relates, so subrecipient, so, in this case, projects, we're talking about local agencies predominantly. So the state DOT, like Harold was saying, is responsible for ensuring that subrecipients meet applicable federal requirements under our program. So adequate oversight with respect to both, if there's a award of the assumed responsibilities that are delegated to the subrecipient. The state DOT is responsible for determining that the funds have adequate project delivery systems and sufficient accounting controls to properly manage these funds. And that's all kind of incorporated in how we do business. It's pretty robust here in Virginia. And the division office is responsible for ensuring the state DOT satisfies that requirement. And that's where we, might get involved in projects or do a program review or a compliance assessment. And I think, I'm not sure if it's on this slide, but we will have some more polls coming up. I don't know. Let me see. Are we supposed to do one on the slide or are we? I think I messed up on my notes. I think I'm just going to keep on moving. I think it's going to come up. Go to the next slide. Just kind of reiterating some of the information about delegation of responsibility. So delegation does not, it's not an assignment of a state DOT's authority or responsibilities as a recipient of the federal fund. So the state DOT still retains oversight responsibilities, but does allow, a subrecipient to administer on behalf of a state DOT. So, really what this is saying is the state DOT's responsibility is not negated when project development and implementation responsibilities are passed to a subrecipient. And that's why it is important we have, different measures in place. We have, there's manuals in place such as the LPA manual. You guys have just started up the qualifications training, we do reviews and compliance. So all of that is to, that we are able to function in this capacity. All right. So we're going to take a break here because we do have some polls that are going to sort of relate to, we don't want to give away the answers. If we show you the next slide, we're going to start giving away answers. So this first poll is, do you release a budget for the project when you put the project out to add? So just a yes or no question. Oh, it says that poll has ended. Is that not showing up on everybody's?
Yep.
I can't see it, but it did pop up for just a 60-second poll. So I think it should be gone by now.
Oh, okay.
We can reopen if you want, but it did close and we got 28 no and 13 yes.
Okay. And then, do we just do the next one too? I think it's number 7, poll number 5.
Yes, give me 1 second. I just got to close this poll out to get to pop it up the next.
We're asking a lot. You're making it more interactive. We have, I don't know, like 10 poll questions or so. So thank you. And Michaela's doing all the background on that. So we appreciate it. But I guess it's a good time if there's any sort of questions. I can check the chat pod.
So I'll ask a question, Karen. When you start talking about the delegation of responsibilities from the state, you've already covered FHWA to the state DOT, and now we're talking about the state DOT to the LPA. You've covered a couple of components that I guess FHWA uses as tools, the cap review, program assessment. You are not as involved on project specific things as much as you used to be from a federal oversight standpoint, from a federal, can you kind of walk through a little bit of the process from the standpoint of when issues are identified, how does that work?
Right. So like you're saying issues are identified on any kind of project?
Sure. I mean, whether it be the state, because some of these polling questions and whatnot, we're very transparent. You'll see some of these questions, some of the content in here as Karen is presenting it. Some of it's cap related from prior reviews. So there's data for both local projects as well as state DOT projects, right. But trying to convey, I think having an understanding, having been directly involved in kind of the response to the cap review, I'd like for you to, if you could just kind of run through the expectation of when there are findings and things along that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I'll kind of answer it in sort of 2 parts. I mean, we say that, we're not involved in projects anymore. That by no means means that people can't pick up the phone and, ask us questions. If it is a local project, we always want to keep the project coordinator, the liaison, project manager on the call at all and keep that line of communication, but we're always available to, get advice and get questions. It just means that we might not have, approval responsibilities. And the fact that we don't have as many approval responsibilities does kind of give us that flexibility to kind of jump in and help on a variety of things and see things programmatically. And then as far as the cap results, so we're getting into a groove with that. We have somebody, so Iris in our office, has been doing the coordination on that, and it is a big effort, and we all do it nationally. So we'll get the results and we'll have findings. That pretty much means if something wasn't compliant, we're not looking for. I mean, there's just no way in heck that we'll get 100% compliance. That's not the goal, but we want reasonable compliance. We want substantial compliance on our program. But if there is a particular regulation, which, there's just a lot of findings on, it would be an area that we might dig a little bit deeper in with the program review, maybe even try to be a little bit more proactive on it and do some targeted reviews to kind of get ahead of it. The cap is definitely, it's after the fact, and then after we're finished for the year, we come up with our sort of an annual report of what we've seen. We provide, recommended
course of action.
But course of action, exactly. And VDOT agrees on it. So we work collaboratively. We have a point of contact with the construction division on that, and we work through the LAD division and agree on the course of action and how we're going to correct it. And then that is just continuous process improvement. And usually it takes about a year or so we usually get our reviews done pretty early because we like to inform our risk process. So we'll get the national results about a year-ish after that. And that will show us sort of the statistically based, how it looks for our whole program. So that it can actually say like, we're at least 87% for our whole program just based on the sample size. So yeah, it's a good question how we use that information. All right, so I think that poll is ended too. So the standard template, yes or no, what was the results on that?
So for the standard template, that poll did close. We had 13 yes and 53 no.
Okay. All right, so now we can go into, I think we're good for a little bit. We won't give away any answers yet with our poll questions. So I'm gonna head up to the next slide. So yeah, so we had, so the way this all kind of came together, Harold had some sort of like a top 10 ish list. It was, it kind of added on to a little bit. And it kind of actually jived with what we were looking at Capes. So it was really interesting to see two totally independent things coming together for this presentation. So that's kind of how we came up with these. So we can go to the slide after this. So the first one is really kind of like a good housekeeping, but they are things that have repeatedly been coming up. And they are important. The required forms, and we're talking about DBE forms, and things that have to be required in a project are missing. Some projects, and this isn't like a one or a two thing, but it happens. Hearsay. So these actually come from Harold. So I can't say they didn't come from the CAP program, but not including a completion date. It is important to have that in there, and any issues with if you have a bid item that doesn't have a reference to a specification, that can really cause some issues down the road for not necessarily being clear on what's all included in that pay item. So if you're laying down pipe and isn't related to a specification, does that include cover? Does it include incidentals? Does it not include incidentals? So that first one is sort of just like housekeeping items. Harold, did you want to add on to?
Yeah, one thing I do want to, because I'm going to be speaking. I know Daniel's on here as well. He works in my shop and runs a lot of these, or almost all of these, from his staff. But one of these things, when these forms, I know we hear a lot of feedback from locals about them being VDOT forms. They are VDOT forms, and I think that there's been some level of commitment from the local governments as they choose to administer these projects locally. However, the key component here is these forms, they're just information, and it's information that we're required to ascertain in accordance with, in most instances, especially when it comes to the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, they're code required. So it very well may be that they're our forms and they're VDOT form numbers, but the information, that's what we're really striving for, is the information that's contained within those forms, to get a clear and accurate picture of what it is we're doing. And when we're not having these forms, it can create issues from a, being able to move forward with an award if all contractors weren't seeing the same information and essentially digesting the same information. And I'll just say some of this, as Michaela and Russ talked at the beginning, we're going to have a follow-up tomorrow with some contractors. So we're going to hear from the horse's mouth, per se, from contractors to understand how some of these things impact them as they're putting bids together. So I just wanted to plug that for tomorrow. But that's all I had to say. I know that I hear a lot about these being VDOT forms, and they're not necessarily needed. They are our forms, but the information that we're obtaining on these forms is derived from a higher level, if you will, and it's all goes back to that the CFR, or the requirements that FHWA imposes on the state as a state recipient of these funds.
All right. Yeah, and I think there was one comment in the chat pod from Dominic saying that uses the standard forms that the county has produced, but also insert the federal highway and VDOT standing forms as required. Yeah, and like I said, I think I don't do bid, pulling together bid documentation, but when, probably a lot of localities, majority of your work is capital improvement funds or other funds, even other federal aid sources. And then you have just a couple of federal aid projects. It's just kind of double checking that these things are in there, since you have a variety of requirements on different projects. So next slide. Let's see. Oops. All right. So Davis-Bacon wage rates. So we all know that Davis. Well, we all know. I'm assuming, but I think so.
There is a poll question that goes with this too. There you go.
Oh no.
Oh no, it's good. We can.
But this is for the next one. Yeah. So the poll. I guess it is.
It's good.
Oh.
We're good.
Okay. Well, yeah. Why don't we answer the? Oh, how that out? How did I mess up with that? All right. So the poll question does go along with this, but be honest on when you're putting together your bid package. When's the last time that you update the wage rates?
Well, we're not giving them the answer here, Karen, though, so that we're good.
Well, they should be able to figure it out when it's required from. Let's see. Oh, okay.
I think we're good.
All right.
This is just so. I mean, a lot of these were coming back.
I know what happened. We missed a slide. Wait, go back one. There we go. See, I didn't. Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. And that's what happened. Okay. I know we had it all figured out. All right. So something that's not allowed in federal aid projects is requiring a contractor's license to bid. I have the CFR reference right here. So, it may not be required as a condition of bid or proposal responsiveness. We did test this regulation in 2019, and overall, from our national results, we're able to say that we're at least 89.9% compliance. And then from the pool of projects, it's about 60 projects total. 97% of the state projects were compliant, and then the local projects was about 88%. And that year, we probably had about, don't quote me, but maybe around like 20 LPA projects. I'd have to go back and check. But Harold, did you want to add anything on?
I think that of note here, one interesting fact here is the Code of Virginia actually carves VDOT highway construction work out and actually exempts contractors from having a license to being a licensed contractor to be able to perform work. So for VDOT, a contractor doesn't, I mean, a lot of them are, and they do have contractor licensure, but it is not a requirement, and the Code of Virginia actually exempts them, for lack of better terms. So it's just a kind of food for thought, if you will. I know a lot of local governments do require this, and it is allowable. It just can't be as a condition of responsive and responsible. It's got to. They have some time to, if they're read low, they have some time to, jump through those hoops, if you will, if they're not currently licensed.
Yeah, and then so Todd asked, can you speak on the pre-qualified list, and is there a requirement to be licensed to be on the pre-qualified list?
No.
Okay.
You have to be registered with SEC, but there is no, DPOR class such and such licensure. They are exempted by the Code of Virginia. So it is not a requirement that when we evaluate, pre-qualification is one of the a area that's under my umbrella here in the division. And when we're looking at that, we're looking at their ability to, their prior or past performance and their ability to perform the work, their financial stability, those types of things. But contractor licensure is not a requirement of pre-qualification.
All right, so we got responses. I don't know if other people see can everybody see
I can.
I can see it. I think everybody can, because I think I'm just a participant. So the question, when does it last have to be updated? Doesn't really give like percentages, but 21 people stated at advertisement authorization, about 25 said at advertisement, 7 said 7 days before letting, and then 10 said up until bid letting. So, so going to the next slide, and we'll talk about Davis-Bacon. So applicable wage determination must be physically incorporated into each contract for the date of bid opening. I lost the answers or the responses. So from the responses, I guess, which I don't have
it was the least answered correct. the correct answer was the least, and I think it was 7 out of the folks got that correct.
Okay, for like 10
days out. So this is one of those things that we see, and I know you're going to get into the cap review. This is one of those things that we see authorization for advertisement come in, and then maybe the project doesn't hit the street for 3 months. And if that happens, there's a very real possibility, and it all comes down to timing, because to when Department of Labor is updating those wage decisions.
Right.
But there are certain times a year that it's pretty reliable, and that we all, like January, we know they're going to come out. But here of late in this past year, we've seen a lot of updates mid-year, way more than normal.
Mm-hmm. Right. And and it would just be, an amendment to the bid package with just, you just slip in the updated, and I don't know how that would work with, electronic, but yeah, it would just, making sure that is done is very important. And it can be pretty variable. So we last tested this in 2018 with CAP. Overall, with our national results, we were at least 84% compliant. And of the pool of projects that we usually have around 60 projects. I don't know how many it was per year, but of those, 92% of the state projects were compliant, and 75% of the local projects were compliant.
And those percentages are Virginia numbers. Correct.
Yeah. So every single number is, so even when it says at least 84% compliant, they calculate it based on our sample size and the size of our program to come up with that. So that's why obviously the 84 doesn't, it's not the same as the other ones. But because of our sample size, we're able to say that, we pooled 60 projects, but we can say that at least 84% of our entire program would be compliant. And then of the projects that we asked the question, just a straight percentage, 92% were compliant for the state and 75% for the local projects. And I thought I had in my notes, and I guess I didn't carry them over to what I printed out. We have that too. We have the reports on what we did. I mean, for something like this, it's just training and making sure that, the LPA manual kind of has those trigger points. Make sure that, you do this type of thing. And we'll be testing it again this upcoming year. So let's see. So we'll wait to switch the slides. This refers, so the next poll question.
Karen, can you?
Oh, just.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I've been watching the questions kind of come in. I know we just had someone ask for clarification and wanted us to to restate, let me get back. When that polling popped up, my chat window disappeared. For clarification, can you restate when the wage rates need to be incorporated in the contract? So I'll take it for first, Karen. Wage rates need to be incorporated in the contract at the time of advertisement. For a locally administered project, they would need to be incorporated when they come in for authorization for advertisement, to gain that federal, essentially authorization number. But once it's on advertisement, if you immediately went to ad with a project that was authorized, if you immediately went to ad and let's say the letting was a month out, 10 days prior to the letting, you need to verify that the wage rates are still current. And if they are not current, you need to issue an addendum and update the wage rates to the new wage decisions. I don't know if you got anything, Karen.
No, and it kind of makes sense, right? That, you want at the bid opening, you want to have the latest prices in there. So it's fair.
Well, and I actually had a local government. I'm going to throw this out there because it was Davis-Bacon driven. I actually got a question from our Northern Virginia district from a locality up there yesterday about Davis-Bacon wage decisions and ultimately the impact of those wage decisions on the cost of the project. And we package almost 90, I'd venture to say 98% of our program, we package federal, even though it's not federal. That way, if some point in time we can make it federal, we'll be able to flip the switch. Typically speaking, in our experience, and when we're looking at bids received and evaluating bids, the wage decisions in most instances are much lower than what they're actually being paid. There may be few instances, but typically speaking, the wage decisions, at least in the recent past, have lagged to some extent, and we really didn't see a spike in the resource cost for because due to the wage decisions. I will call that locality back though.
All right, good. Oh, here, I think you have the next slide.
All right.
We're gonna move to the next one.
Yes, please. So qualification requirements. Can you throw that the poll back up there, Michaela, please? So this is one of those things that we see a lot of, and I'm going to be very, we want to be very transparent here. We deal with this in our internal shop with VDOT administered projects quite a bit when it comes to project specific special provisions, but we are not allowed and we should not be including vague qualification requirements as they pertain to a contractor and prior experience or something of the like. Here again, this is something that my staff, when we're dealing with our VDOT state administered, we see a lot of specifications that are trying to say, we want a contractor with X amount of experience. We want a contractor that's done 3 of these jobs over the last 10 years. It becomes an unenforceable spec and it could hurt competition overall because typically speaking, it's much later in the process. There is the ability to approach this in a different way, and that would be through a RFQ or actual qualification process, but it would need to be very highly specialized work. I've been in this role or a very similar role for about 5 years now, and I can think of one instance that we've done this and we weren't overly supportive and the bids showed that the qualification process probably wasn't necessary, but we did go through an RFQ process. So there are ways to do this. There are tools in the toolbox to get it done, but having requiring those types of vague or unclear requirements that really become very subjective, and it gets down to is this scope of work similar to the scope of work of this project, and it becomes too subjective, and it's not it comes down to it's just not enforceable. Michaela, I'm sorry. Can you throw up that poll question one more time? I wanted to also throw this in. The poll question was directly related to qualifications of, we get regularly receive reference checks on projects that are being administered locally. And I just wanted to reinforce that those types of things after the fact are here again unenforceable. We would not be able to concur with an award, even if you got a negative reference back after the fact. It would have to be done prior to the bid submission. And even further, having that type of language in there can negatively affect your competition. This will be another thing that we talk about tomorrow with the contractor, so you can hear it directly from some sample contractors of how they, when they see some language, what does that do? How do they address it? Those types of things. So just to make it clear, we don't want to be including unenforceable language into the contract and ultimately negatively affecting that competition component. But we can do an RFQ process if it's highly specialized work or something so unique that warrants something along those lines. Karen, did you have anything there? I will add.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say there's one more question in the chat. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. Let me get over here to the chat. So this question is, can we award to someone who has no experience in the type of project on which they are bidding? So we, as a component of the pass-through monies, VDOT, you should be using VDOT pre-qualified contractors. And if they are pre-qualified, that is the measure there. So to answer your question, yes, we have that happen at times. And yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to. We have had projects where contractors may not have direct experience. Now, it might be a conversation with the contractor if you have a contractor, but at the same time, if it comes down to you not being able to move forward with that bidder per se, it isn't that you can just discard that bid and move to the next bidder. It would be a rejection of all bids and a re-advertisement of the project. And I will also talk about I think that was it for that one. I hope I can, I see we've had a few projects that were disastrous because the contractors didn't know how to do the work. As unfortunate as that is, I'm sorry, I'm in the office today and I'm going to stop for a second because I've got some fire trucks and ambulances rolling by. All right, I think they moved off. So, yes, I hate to say to that question, it happens. We've had it happen. It doesn't happen often. We do get performance and payment bonds and stuff along those lines as an assurance to those types of situations. And I've seen even those fail. So that's I hate to say inherent of what we do but at the same time, for there to be some highly specialized nature that you were running through an RFQ process to essentially say you're in or you're out prior to bids being solicited, that would be the only other alternative. But it's one of those things that it's a very rare circumstance for that to happen. But I can understand that some of I've seen a lot of disasters in that regard, but all right, why couldn't we go with the second low bidder? So the federal code is very specific. It's a competitive low bid market. You would have to determine that contractor to be non-responsive and checking a reference after the fact. It doesn't meet that stick. I don't know, Karen, if you want to add anything there. We've had some disasters on our end. It happens. But it's a rarity, I would say, for us. But it does happen. And we've had to pull bonds and had to, in some instances, have had to, even the bonding company failed to perform, and we had to do an emergency contract. So it happens, but it is a rare occurrence.
Yeah, and I think we have another one about competition. We'll speak more on that as well. All right. So we're going to I think I'm next. So the next one we typically have good compliance on, but it does still come up, especially with subcontracts. So do verify that the federal specifications in the project are current. I know the slide's going to come up, so I'm just going to keep talking. So that is the form 1273 that has to go in. It can't be referenced in the document. Actually has to be completely incorporated into the contract, physically incorporated into the contract, and it needs to be in all of the subcontracts. So that's just very important. It has a lot of, I'm just blank of words for the moment, but all the federal aid what am I stumbling on? This is a good quiz. What's in the 1273? We did test it in 2017. Like I said, it has a high compliance. I thought we tested it, and Hilbert, I know he's on the line. I know we tested it on subcontracts, and that's always been a lot lower in, especially when you get EEO stuff, and you're really talking about, protecting the labor and civil rights issues. So we really, really want to make sure that we're verifying that that's all included in the prime contract as well as the subcontract. So just again, like a good housekeeping item. And before we get to the next slide, the poll question is, do you allow for contract negotiations after bid submission on federal aid contracts? And then we'll wait a little bit if there's any questions. This is a good time. And just anything that we've sort of talked about so far. I'll let that poll go through.
Yeah, I was just checking to see if we had any additional. We don't, not right now. Other questions?
So as people are answering, we can go ahead on to the next one. I'll be covering it. All right. So the next one is a do not. So I like everybody, answering honestly. So do not. So federal aid does not allow negotiations with contractors. It's something, and actually I should make sure that I wrote that correctly. It may be allowed in state code. I have that correct, right?
No, it is allowed in state code on state funded projects if you have to be essentially explicit in the IFB or your proposal and state as such, but it is allowed in state code on state funded projects.
All right, I wrote that correctly. But it is expressly prohibited in 23 CFR. The negotiations with contractors during the period following the opening of bids and before the award of the contract shall not be permitted. Now I'm going to go into a little history lesson. So I learned a little bit with doing research for this presentation. But yeah, we talked about it before. Competition in the federal aid program is it's inherent in the program. When the beginning, 1938 is when Congress really required the contracts to be awarded competitively. And then sort of speaking specifically, about the negotiation issue. So, and that's kind of the reason, right? there is, you have your disastrous projects, but, having good specifications, taking the risk out of the project, having projects that you can get a good project out of should hopefully help. But federal aid contracts shall be awarded only on the basis of the lowest responsive bid submitted by a bidder, meeting the criteria of responsibility, as established by the owner of the project. And as far as negotiations goes, the act of a contracting agency negotiating with the apparent low bidder is kind of identified as bid rigging in reverse. Like I said, it's expressly prohibited. And circumstances that justify negotiation are really an exception. And making approve of this is sort of an extremely rare thing with federal aid contracts. So it looks like about 11 allowed negotiations, and 39 that responded I put no. And this kind of goes into that bucket of where it is sort of vastly different than the majority of your projects that might be state funded or locally funded, and something to just watch out for to make sure that you have a clean document moving forward. Harold, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I mean, I think that this is one of those, I hate to say cut and dry, but I mean, it is just from all the reasons that I'm not even going to go back into. You said it extremely well. We do have a couple questions. Someone wanted to know if they can negotiate after the award then. So I guess it would that question, you're awarding the project as it exists. And once you've awarded and executed the contract, you've signed an executed contract with the contractor. I don't know that you would have a lot of leverage to get them to change their price. And I mean, I can't imagine we're talking about raising their price, so you'd be trying to get them to lower their price. I don't know any contractor that would do that after the fact. So I think the answer would be no. No, we wouldn't be successful in that regard.
Hey, Harold, this is Gilberto. Can I jump in? Can you hear me?
Now we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I thought you couldn't hear me because you guys kept quiet. But I was going to say, usually it's a change order, right? Once you've awarded a contract, you negotiate your changes. That's a basic change order if you're negotiating after award. Once you've awarded, your contract's executed, you move on. And then if you need to negotiate anything, you throw a change order in and you make whatever changes you need to make.
Correct. I didn't get into that level of detail. I mean, this just says, so can you negotiate after the award? I think you award based on the low bid submitted. So to Gilberto's point, yes, I mean, there's always negotiations if there's work to be added or changed or scope, any of those types of things that would be handled through a work order. The original intent of the contract and the actual bid submitted, that is what's being awarded, is the dollars, whatever their low bid was. So once you've awarded that amount, you would be executing a contract in that amount. So I know it was kind of a dual answer there, but I think from the standpoint of the intent of the original contract, no. I mean, we even have, with our standards and specifications, if we delete scope, that puts us on the hook depending on how much scope we potentially delete, and puts us on the line from a financial standpoint with the contractor. They need to have some level of expectation of the work formed, and that's what they're pricing when they submit their bid.
All right.
I think that was where I got a follow up. So a reductive change order. I don't. That would have to be I think we're getting off a little bit, but I think that the contractor would need to sign that, and I don't know that you're going to have a contractor willing to sign reducing the work that they're going to do. I think it's very project specific, and I don't know if we have something like that in mind here. But with that, Karen.
Yeah, well, actually, it's yours. We're going to get into the alternative or bid additives next.
All right. We do have a completion date question as well, I think, that came up as well, but we'll get that. Maybe we'll hit that one in the end. So this is something that we get a lot of questions and
I'm on mute there. We're going to hear them.
Karen, can you hear me?
Hey, Harold, we can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. Karen dropped off the screen, so I wasn't sure what was going on, if we were having connectivity issues. All right, so we want to be thorough on alternates or bid additives and contracts. It's an excellent tool in the toolbox. We utilize this quite frequently, and we've been doing it more and more. A lot of localities, I'm sure, have seen and are experiencing budget constraints in our current economic market, and we're trying to find ways to be creative in delivering projects. And maybe that means part of the project, but not all of the project, or a component of the project, or maybe we're testing the waters and trying to figure out if we have the monies available to be able to, put in some niceties, not necessarily necessities. Those are all perfectly doable things, approaches. What has to happen, though, is we have to be explicitly clear in the proposal or the IFB in how we're communicating not only that work, but even further how the award will take place. That award of the contract is actually based on. So are you having a base bid with an alternate that it could be based on funding availability? And if it's based on funding availability, then you would need to be declaring whether or not that funding, what that threshold is when you're opening the bids, whether it exceeded the available funds or not. So it really gets down to, like I said, the common issues here is we're getting, I don't want to say complicated, because some of these can be extremely detailed. And I mean, we here have done alternate or additive where we've added turn lanes through. We got pricing for turn lane to see, based on need, if you will. So they can get very complicated from the standpoint of the scope of work we're accomplishing. But ultimately, we just need to be explicitly clear and very concisely specify how the contract is being awarded. If we don't do that, in theory, it could change the order of bidders and result in maybe a different low bidder, so forth and so on. So we just want to make sure that when we're doing additives or alternates, that we're laying that out very clearly and concisely in the bid documents. So I got a question. If it's based on available funding, do we have to disclose the budget? Yes. I mean, when I open bids, I declare whether or not a bid is within the range of the evaluative estimate, which is the department's essentially bid for the same work. I don't disclose the actual estimate in that instance, but when we have a project that is based on funding, I only declare whether or not that project with an additive or an alternative approach, I only declare whether or not that the bid that was received was within or exceeded the funding. So hopefully that answers your question. So I'm not giving them an actual dollar amount, but I am telling them it was within or exceeded that whatever the funding was available. All right. Can we go to the next slide? So do not require a retainage. We see these, and I'll be honest with you, I have some local history. I worked for both the county and the city for almost 10 years in my career. We held retainage on local projects, but with projects that are federally funded, and I will even say state funded projects in accordance with the local assistance manual that are administered through the local assistance program. retainage is not allowed. Only, and let me step back and restate that it is not allowed as a wholesale concept. Retainage is allowed and may be withheld in accordance with our standards and specifications allow for retainage when performance, and specifically when I say performance, schedule falls behind. So if a contractor on a federal aid contract falls behind schedule, you can retain payment until such time as they recover from whatever that schedule, delta was, whether they, once they get back on track, that retainage would need to be, any in arrears would need to be paid to the contractor. So I'm looking at the poll questions and I see 9 responses in the affirmative that they do hold retainage on, I can't see the entire, I think it's said on federal aid contracts. So just to be clear, federal aid contracts, just an outright retainage is not allowed and is actually prohibited by CFR. However, performance related retainage is acceptable. However, would need to be returned to the contractor once they've recovered their schedule. And here again, this is one of those things I know because we see a lot, we review these documents when they come in, we see the standard language. My previous comment about past history, I know that a lot of locally funded projects may allow for retainage, and we're using standard language that needs to essentially, can't be used on a federal aid contract or a state funded locally administered project in accordance with the local assistance manual. We will talk about, this will be one of the things that we talk about with the contractors roundtable tomorrow. So everybody can understand what retainage, when they see this, what that means and that cost of money to them. So more to come on this tomorrow, and you can hear how the contractors perceive the risk and the reality of a retainage. All right. I think that, Karen, I think the next one's you.
All right. This might be our last one.
I think
doing pretty good. So this one, but do ensure that contract execution is within 60 days of bid award. So our Code of Federal Regulations require that the contract be awarded within the time established by the state. That time is 60 days. We tested this just recently in 2020, so we don't have the statistical analysis completed yet, but there were 5 locally administered projects for a variety of reasons. I mean, there are some things that justifiably happened, but it's just always something to work into the schedule that that projects are awarded within the 60 days of, are executed within the 60 days of the bid award. So Harold, did you want to add anything with this one?
I think that one component here too to remember is that the contracting industry, if in here again, I don't want to rob, but so much from tomorrow's presentation and the roundtable with the contractors, but these types of things affect, may not affect the existing bid, but could affect future bids. Ultimately, the time frame is 60 days. That is a state mandated time frame to execute contracts. In theory, a contractor only has to hold his price for those 60 days. After 60 days, if we have not awarded and I say award, if we have not executed the contract in 60 days, they could not honor their prices and either withdraw their bid or try and acquire additional monies beyond what their bid was due to a delay. And in that instance, we've seen situations arise from a risk standpoint. We talked about, I've seen a lot of that word risk over there in the chat box throughout this presentation. The risk there is if we delay and it's on it belongs to, that delay belongs to the department or the locality. That could have impacts later on when it comes to fixed completion dates and the like from the contractor. And if we didn't honor our initial commitment, then they would be due time on the back end. This has been something that has happened, with us before, and we're explicit. We execute within 60 days. If it's beyond 60 days, it's always at the contractors. They fail to, meet their obligations of getting in timely paperwork or something along those lines. But that being said, in the execution letter, we're explicit and acknowledge the delay and put them on notice at that point in time that no further time or financials will be entertained due to the delay at their control. So I see a couple questions. I think that I see one on here, and this can be an issue for small localities where they have boards that have to approve or execute the contract. They don't meet on a regular schedule. There are some challenges there. We have very similar challenges, believe it or not for the same reasons, but ultimately not meeting regularly. The Commonwealth Transportation Board has delegated award approval to the commissioner for projects less than $5 million. Anything greater than $5 million requires board action. This Commonwealth Transportation Board meets once a month. They do not meet in August. They typically do not meet in November. So we have to adjust our bid letting and our analysis process to meet that schedule. That's how we, that's how we handle it. We deal with not the same, and I don't know how often, but out of 12 months in a year, our Commonwealth Transportation Board only meets 10 months, and anything greater than $5 million has to go to them for action, and ultimately award authorization or award approval, I should say. So my advice there is you're really going to have to manage the advertisement and letting schedule to those. Hopefully those are public meetings. That's the positive with the CTB. They typically post those meetings for the year in advance. So we tailor our letting schedule around the CTB schedule to address those issues. And we have other reviews involved as well. Anything greater than $10 million requires an Attorney General review from a high risk standpoint that we got to factor in as well. The 60 days is from bid letting. You have 60 days to execute a contract from the letting. Can we request the bidder to hold their pricing in writing if we have a delay for some reason? Yes, I think that is a very viable option, and I think most of the time we've had to do similar situations for a number of different reasons, and that is exactly how we've handled it. Aaron, do you have anything? I'm trying to skim through here. Well, I think that, can we go to the next slide? Karen, you're muted.
Thank you. It only happened once on the last slide. So this is sort of the summary of, the things to do to keep in mind, a lot of housekeeping type of items, making sure we have updated wage rates and federal specifications included in there. When you're doing things that are, a little bit different than, we talked a lot about competition and, the lowest responsive bid, but we are utilizing other contracting methodologies. So if you are doing something like that, coordinating early and often with VDOT, and maybe they'll reach out to Federal Highway as well, just being very thorough and open on that. So go to the next slide. And things to kind of watch out for that might, some of these kind of fall into the box of items that might be allowed on, for state or local funding, but is not allowed in federal aid funding. These kind of all fall into that box. I think the third one is probably the one where, if there is, a project that you guys are concerned about, the contractor performance, coordinating again with VDOT and kind of discussing some ways that you might be able to mitigate those concerns or those risks and to address them on the project either through, design bid build or, other ways. So I think that's it. I think we have one more poll question. It's really just asking and use the chat box feature for this, but if there's any, additional training or resources that everybody is interested in, kind of put a plug in here for, and we haven't had, I think we were scheduled to do this fall. We were going to have a contract core curriculum course, the contract administration core curriculum course. We do have several folks locally trained. Roberto De Leon and Jose Granada is also trained in that course. It's a 2 or 3 day, I can't remember, but it's an NHI course. It's very thorough, kind of goes through everything, all of the requirements. So if that type of course is of interest, there's some, I don't think that one is virtual, but there's other courses. If you go to the NHI website that you can get virtually, which you've already been to, is our Federal Aid Essentials, which had been developed several years ago, but the content is still very valid and relevant for little videos of what's going on. So, but if you have like other areas where you just think, additional training or resources would be worthwhile to have, put that in the chat pod.
I think, Karen, I want to open it up for questions. I want to make one, I guess, clear. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about this and kind of walking through this over the last 6 weeks or so. And I appreciate here again, you're being too modest in your level of effort here. I applaud your effort and your support of both myself and my staff as we're working through these issues and trying to get where we need to be. I think in follow-up, one of the things that I want to make clear that, because I know that it seems like when I'm working and my staff are working with a lot of the local staff, there's I don't want to say it's adversarial, but it's this us and them. And I know I've heard VDOT way. I really wanted to address that in this larger group, because, the way we do things in most, if not all instances, has some direct tie back to federal highway, because we're building our program and using a lot of monies and even planning for, and it's a lot of instances that using state money, but hoping that we can get federal money at some point in the future. So a lot of the way we do things, whether they be on forms or the verbiage that we use, are derivative, are I don't want to say a straight takeaway from federal highway, but it's our collaboration with federal highway to get where we are today. And when we are trying to convey or impart some of that wisdom, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And in most instances, as to go back to what Karen kind of started out with, this is our obligation. We, the state DOT, ultimately the commissioner, signed the stewardship oversight and agreement in accordance with the division administrator for the Virginia division of FHWA. And we've made a commitment that we're going to, look at these things, review these things, just like the feds would have or have in the past, but now it is on us to do. So it's not one of these, a lot of these things, I hate to say they're not niceties, but they're necessities. And most of the time, a lot of these things are code driven. They're flat out, there's CFR that speaks to it. So I hopefully we can open up. I know we've gotten a lot of input and questions along the way. I don't know, Michaela, I know we have another half an hour. I don't know, not advocating to take all that time, but can we open it up to the floor and see if we have any comments or questions that people want to ask, directly?
Yeah, that's fine. We have this until 3. Everyone is muted, but you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to chime in. Or you can keep using the chat box feature like you have been, and we can keep monitoring that.
Hey there, Harold and Tara. This is Brian Locker, Local Assistance Construction here in Richmond District. I want to thank you both today for the presentation. Harold, I guess this question is to you. Can you elaborate on the specifics of what you all look for there in central office, the condition of granting the authorization to advertise these contracts?
I mean, I hate to say we do have a checklist that we use, that we try, but by the time, I'm going to be very frank with you, Brian, that the workload, by the time we get it, we're looking for fatal flaws. That's the reason I'd like to say that a lot of the stuff that we're looking for or trying to address are CFR regulations, because it's just that critical. I mean, by the time it gets to us, the locality would have put their thumbs on it and more than likely had a consultant prepare or their documents, or actually doing a lot of the legwork. It comes through based on our local program. It comes through the local project coordinator at the district level, and every district's a little more is unique in its own right, and how much they're involved and maybe what they're looking at. That's something that Russ and I have discussed, and I'm sure that those conversations will continue from the standpoint of, by the time it gets to us, we're in theory the third set of eyes on it. We're trying to do a very high level fatal flaw kind of approach, critical error type of thing. But we've covered some of the things that kind of how this started out. It was a top 10 type of list. These things that create ambiguity in the proposal or the IFB that ultimately creates questions or confusion for the contractor. And here again, you've heard, I know Karen brought up, Gilberto brought it up. One of the driving forces here is competitiveness. We want competitive bids, and any of that ambiguity, as clear as we can get those documents, that's going to help us, because you're going to hear from contractors tomorrow and how they view some of these risks and what that means to their bid, or maybe not to their bid, which isn't good for anyone. So I don't know, that probably didn't answer your question, Brian, directly. We do have a makeshift checklist, but by the time it gets to us, we're not in the weeds. We're looking at it from a fatal flaw perspective.
Okay, and that's consistent, I think, where we are as VDOT as an agency with local assistance projects. We're not in the front lines, if you will. It's more of a high level review. So I just wanted to get your input. Thank you for that, Harold.
Sure. Any other questions? I'm looking here. See, what's the best location to get the most current federal provisions to use in our contracts? I had Daniel and I were trading emails with some folks in local assistance. I believe it was yesterday, as well as our spec section in regards to our pick list, our local project pick list. There's some work to be done there, and it is our desire to get that pick list in a much better and ultimately a more functional state for the localities to be able to utilize, to grab our specifications and standards in accordance with the local assistance manual and ultimately those federal components. I think the ultimate, one of the big takeaways here, Karen isn't, I don't see her in my top across the top here anymore. Hopefully she's still here, or Gilberto. But one of the components here is, ultimately what we're trying to do with a lot of the comments and the things that we're doing, I want to convey that we're not trying to be a roadblock here. We're trying to protect both the department as well as the locality, because worst case scenario is, the project that had federal funds on it may not be federally eligible, or a component of the project might not be federally eligible, or it might affect future federal eligibility. There's a lot of things here. Ultimately, what we're trying to do and trying to get to is a place where all of that risk that I've seen over here on the thread is mitigated to the best of our ability, and we're not knowingly doing things that aren't allowed according to FHWA and ultimately the CFR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just kind of add to that, since there are, several layers of review for these projects, it doesn't do anybody any good for, something that, needs to be revised when it's found out at like the last stage of review, because you've already kind of lost some time, and, it might not be in sync with like city council or board approval. So we want to be able, I think the idea, and I think, it sounds like there is some interest, in some sort of checklist. It would have to be a lot more detailed, kind of like what Harold was saying. They're just looking at high level, but, kind of developing a checklist of things to make sure that are in the projects, that's easy to use, and that's utilized early in the process. So these types of things are not, holding up a project. 'Cause I think, in the end, it might just seem like, well, we want to get this project out, and now it will be delayed because of this comment. And that's part of what we want to avoid. And also, what we do at the, division office is, to kind of have substantial compliance. We definitely don't want these things, ending up in like an OIG audit or something like that. So that's why, we're definitely, and it's for, it's the best interest of the public funds fundamentally, but it's better for us to find out about them than, an OIG audit or something like that.
And just own it.
Yep. And finding it out early and having checklists. It sounds like there's a lot of interest in something like that.
Right.
Renee had asked about, how to prepare for a federal audit. Oh.
Well, I guess one thing that I will say to kind of piggyback on what you had just said was, a lot of times, and we're dealing with this with a locality that we've engaged FHWA. Karen's been in some conversations, local assistants here in central office, as well as the district, where they have utilized standards and specifications that aren't approved, and it's not something that's easy to just withdraw, because the plans, the whole approach was designed around this, approaching it this way. So the sooner the better, because trying to fix it after the fact becomes very problematic at best. That being said, I see a lot of checklist questions. A lot of our checklist is the local program, the manual. I don't know if Russ wants to plug that or someone on his staff, but I feel like there's been a lot of, and that's something that gets updated regularly, that we're always looking at and trying to tweak. Unfortunately, there's not something as simple as, hey, you've checked all these boxes, you're good to go. Every project's unique, but I think the manual itself is a resource, and a lot of what we use from that fatal flaw perspective is derived from the manual. So I don't want to throw Russ under the bus, but I want to give you an opportunity to plug the manual as well.
Yeah, I think Lloyd went ahead and did that. He provided the link in there.
Thank you, Lloyd.
On top of it.
And that's the pick list. I'm actually, I know we've talked about the checklist. I think that the manual, that I'm not going to say it's, and I don't want to critique. I'm sure everybody's got, their own opinion, but there's a lot, that's a resource. There's a lot of information in there, and we spend a lot of time. I've had staff, I know other construction staff from a contract administration standpoint have been looking at that manual in the last 6 to 12 months, updating it. So it's something that we're regularly looking at. We, VDOT, are regularly looking at and trying to make sure we're current and up to date. Yeah. Kurt, thank you. I see Kurt put through in there that there's an advertisement award checklist in Chapter 12 of the LAP manual. Karen, I know I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Good.
You were talking.
No, I'm good.
You said somebody else you were looking at somebody's question.
No, I think I just said that Lloyd posted it.
Okay.
The link, yeah.
Do we have any other feedback, comments, questions, thoughts?
Hey, Harold, this is John Bechtold out in Bristol. And just want to say, it was really good information. I appreciate you and Karen's all the effort you obviously put into putting this together. So that's a lot of good information. One of the ones I wanted to comment on, I think or one of the things that I'm taking away from it, that trying to think through the process, is that 60-day window, and just, really trying to manage that, think of ways that we can manage that, especially if there's a funding issue or some of those things can take up a lot of time just working back and forth. But, that's one of those things that I'm taking away from it. So I appreciate that. And just thinking through how we can run some things concurrently, maybe instead of, maybe in the past we've ran them more sequentially, looking at, let's take care of this issue, then this issue, then this issue. And before you know it, your 60 days is gone. Maybe we need to do some things at the same time.
Yeah, I can speak to that from our program perspective. We advertise 400 to 500 contracts a year, over $1 billion worth of total value. We're always John and Daniel are always balancing those components and keeping us on track and on schedule to meet that 60-day time frame. Now, I will say that things always come up, and being flexible and fluid. I don't think anybody's going to come back if you have if you as a local government have to go over the 60 days. You're engaging the contractor. The contractors agreed to meet their, hold their prices in writing, and you have all these, you're working towards the ultimate goal. But just to be clear, the expectation is 60 days from letting to execution. But I think that here again, as long as as long as the standard's not becoming 90 or 120 or, we've seen some very big deltas, and from the time bids were brought in and they're coming in for award authorization. And, I've had a couple of conversations with Daniel and some of my staff, and, questioning whether or not the contractor is even willing to hold whether or not they're willing to hold their bid, quite frankly, because that's obligating them to potentially not chase other work. And here again, that's the reason we did this as a two-parter. There's going to be some common themes here that you're going to see from today till tomorrow. But I'm hopeful that when you're hearing it from the horse's mouth and the people that are actually digesting these documents and trying to put a realistic, bid price to that number, I think we need to take that to heart. That is the market. At least, I've gotten two contractors to participate, and they're the ones that are submitting bids and setting that market. So I think we need to take heed of what they're sharing or willing to share, quite frankly. But thank you, John. Does anybody else have anything?
And I'll just address a couple of the interests with sort of like federal audit reviews and maybe some training on that. I wrote down a couple of names because I think there's sort of a wide range of what a federal aid audit could be. Could be a billing review or like a program review. But I like the idea. I think it came from Rita. We had since I think the virtual environment kind of lends us some opportunities to think about things a little differently. And I know that Iris, I think she had to jump off to another meeting, but you know, in the past, we never really did like a big virtual like kickoff for CAP. We've always just sort of kicked it off with kind of like a smaller group, but I think that might actually be, you know, a pretty good idea that, you know, we could hold sort of a kickoff for it just so that everybody sort of hears it from one source of what the upcoming questions are and all of that. So that's something that I'll take back to the office. But in general, like I said, like each federal audit, you know, they each have their different flavor and, you know, a different approach. I think just the biggest advice for that is just, you know, it's not scary. I mean, even when we get audited, you know, it can be like a little bit scary, like, oh gosh, what documentation do they need? I mean, we kind of feel the same way that you all feel probably when we come knocking on your door. But yeah, it's just, you know, being open with the information, you know, having the documentation available and, you know, when things just aren't there, just, you know, being honest, and we'll, you know, more times than not, probably 99.9% of the time, you know, if, you know, just something wasn't quite there, you know, we work through it, we learn our lesson, we remedy it through process improvement and we move forward. So that's probably sort of the advice on that, but I will definitely take away the idea of maybe doing like a virtual kickoff, because we know what projects were selected. It's a random selection. We're just finalizing some of our additional questions for this year that we'll be going over. And once that's done.
So I'm looking, I've got a couple questions here regarding some of the forms. The specifically, it looks like related to the DBE, the C111, the 112, the 48, the 49 in timing. Those are critical. You know, you have the C111, that's due at bid day or within 24 hours, the 112's 72 hours, 48's 10 days, I believe, if memory serves. It's a struggle. I got a comment or question on that. That's real, that we experience with contractors. It's important. We always tell not only our low bidder, but our second, at minimum, our second bidder should be providing those documents because those timeframes are a commitment. I know that we've had to reject some local jobs for that because of these issues. We have had to do the exact same thing. It's rare, but it does happen. I can think of it doesn't happen often, but for full transparency, and I think that's here again, one of the things I want to drive home, the stuff that we're asking of the locals is the same stuff that we're committing ourselves to. I can think of a project that we had 5 bidders on, last, I want to say January, February timeframe. The low bidder failed to meet their timely submission of their DBE paperwork. And we looked to go to the second bidder. The second bidder didn't submit anything. The third bidder submitted some of it, but not all of it. The fourth bidder didn't submit anything. The fifth bidder submitted everything and would have been awardable, but they exceeded the budget, the available, in that instance, it was available, or they exceeded the range of the evaluative estimate. But so in that instance, we had 5 bidders on a project and had any level of either failure to provide documents in a timely manner or failure to provide documents, period. And that resulted in a bid being rejected on a large project. I want to say it was a multi-million-dollar project with 5 bidders that we had to reject all bids and re-advertise for. So it's a struggle. It's real. Our advice to our contractors, the C111 is done up front. The C112, we've tried to convey to our contracting industry to try and get those up front. Chasing those down after the fact becomes problematic for them. And it gets down to that good faith effort that they have to document why or how. And typically, a phone call isn't enough, looking for a document. So while I recognize it's a real struggle, it's one that we struggle with as well. And the reality is we have to reject bids at times, competitive, good bids, for those reasons, the same reasons. So here again, we're all in that same boat, working towards the same goal. I see a comment also about repository, about Buy America, for some of the federal documentation. They were referencing specifically Buy America, standardized set of forms. One thing that I can tell you that some of the folks, I don't know, I know Russ was involved in some of his staff. I am on a task force. The Secretary of Transportation has tasked another CTB member with a local programs workshop or workforce that we started meeting earlier this year. And I hate to say COVID derailed us, but it's a large group and we've been unable to meet subsequently. I know it's on the horizon, or the desire to meet is definitely there. There have been lots of things thrown out there, from a standard form to a standard IFB to, I don't know what the outcome of that would be. It seemed promising. Here again, I don't want to steal Russ's thunder because it's something I know that he's working very closely. He and his staff are working closely with. But what I can tell you is that there have been discussions of that along those lines that we don't know the outcome of just yet. But the fact that they're being entertained or discussed, I think, is positive for the department and all of our local partners. So I'm hopeful. Karen, do you have anything else?
I think I'm good. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your help. Gilberto, you as well. I know, but like I said, Karen, I can't, I'm giving you all the accolades here. So thank you. Russ,
good collaboration.
Russ or Michaela, do y'all want to close us out, or? I will put a plug in. I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow morning for our contractor roundtable. It should be exciting, and I'm hopeful that we get a lot of input and questions and answers through that session as well. So thank y'all.
Yes, so we did record this webinar. We will be posting it to our external website. If you were registered for today's webinar, then you will be getting an email once we have it posted. Like Harold said, there is part 2 to this webinar, is going to be tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. When you registered for this one, you also registered for the second one. In your email that had the joining information for today's webinar, there's also the joining information for tomorrow's webinar as well. So if you have any questions, please just send me, Michaela McCain, an email and just let me know. But again, just thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Harold and Karen, for joining us today. And if anyone has any questions or anything that you think of after the fact, please send them an email to me and I can make sure they get to Harold and Karen. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.